I'm here in Heinsberg at NRG Systems, a leader in wind and solar technology. A UVM student began an internship here last summer. We're going to hear from him today and find out about his experience and how he went from learner to leader. Join us as we continue Research Week here on the program and talk with a soon-to-be UVM grad whose future is bright. Good afternoon, and thanks for stopping by Across the Fence. I'm Keith Silva, in for Amy Finley. For seniors in college, their last semester means arrivals and departures, saying goodbye to friends and places they've called home for the last 4 years, while turning the page on a new chapter in life with all the responsibilities and challenges that come with starting a career. Ethan Perry will graduate in a couple of weeks with a degree in electrical engineering from the University of Vermont. Ethan joins me today to talk past, present, and future, specifically his past, present, and future. Ethan, welcome. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
So I'm a Vermont kid. I grew up down in southern Vermont, a small little town called Shaftesbury. It's in Bennington County. And, you know, admittedly growing up, I thought it was a little boring, it was a little slow. But as I've gotten older, I've really grown to appreciate kind of that small town Vermont feel. It's very quaint, it's a beautiful area. And so, you know, in retrospect, I'm very happy to have grown up there. And yeah, I really have a lot of love for Vermont.
So you came north. What is it like growing up in southern Vermont, so distant from UVM? I mean, not very far, but very far if you're from southern Vermont. Did you know about UVM? Was that a place you wanted to go to school?
It's funny because when I was applying to colleges, UVM was not my top choice. I was not super motivated going to the state school of Vermont. Right. I ended up going there because of the financial reasons. I was paying for my own tuition. I wanted to save a few dollars, but I'm really happy with how things have worked out. I've had such an amazing time at UVM, and looking back, I wish I could tell myself when I was trying to go somewhere else that just go to UVM, you're gonna love it. I've been so impressed by the curriculum, all the professors I've had. I've met some lifelong friends. I love the area, and it's really nice to be, you know, 2.5 hours from my home. I can go home any weekend I want. And so it wasn't my top choice, but I'm so incredibly happy that it's worked out the way it has.
So to all the high schoolers out there that might be thinking about, your advice is just go to UVM.
Yeah, absolutely. Would recommend it to anybody. Yep.
Excellent. You did something that when I was a student in college I wouldn't have ever thought about. You switched majors. You switched majors to electrical engineering from computer science. Why'd you make the switch?
Yeah, you know, there were a few reasons I switched, and of course it's a hard decision, especially I was 2 years into computer science, and I knew if I switched to electrical engineering, I would probably have to add an extra year to my curriculum. The decision was, I think one of the main reasons was that as I've gotten older, I've grown increasingly interested in the power grid, and you know, how is it that we can walk in a building and we have all these lights around us here, and how we don't even think about it. I feel like we take it for granted, and I've been very interested in how do we generate power, how do we get it from point A to point B, and I've just become increasingly interested in that and the complexities of it. And so I thought to myself, if that's a career path I really want to go down, I would be better suited as an electrical engineering major than a computer science major. And I still love computer science. I still love applying my coding skills, but I think I've been happy with the switch, and it's definitely had its hard moments. It's a hard major, but I've been lucky that I've been very interested in all of the classes I've done. So it doesn't feel like a burden. It feels like a challenge, but it's a challenge that I enjoy doing and that I've gotten a lot of fulfillment out of.
Is the computer science crossover with electrical engineering at all?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Especially as the industry has evolved, there are a lot of methods that have been able to be streamlined through the knowledge of how to code and how to work with the computer to perform different electrical simulations. Okay. And so back in the day, there were a lot of pencil and paper hand calculations, very tedious work. And of course, that's still a big part of it, but it's a matter of simplifying a big equation into putting it into a computer and having it run 10,000 different simulations and being able to make informed decisions based off of that. So there certainly is a lot of overlap, and every person who I've talked to currently in the industry says that having that coding background is going to take you far. So I'm excited about that.
Well, good. Easy for you, I should say. Easy for you. Not so much for the communications major here. You have been doing an internship. You started last summer at NRG out in Heinsberg. Was out there for the lead of the show. How did that start?
You know, it's funny because I have been interested in NRG for a couple of years now. I had heard about their work and I thought it was very interesting. And so last year when I was looking for different internships, I would check their careers page pretty regularly to try to find a job, but they never posted an internship. And so eventually I kind of moved on until one day I got an email in my inbox from the Barrett Foundation Scholarship. And the Barrett Foundation is a foundation set up by Richard Barrett, who was a UVM grad back in, I think, 1966. And he created this foundation to support engineering students who are interested in doing research for sustainability reasons or environmental engineering reasons. And so I was looking through that email, and there were maybe 20 proposed environmental projects, and one of them was a project with NRG. And so naturally, I reached out right away to the company contact, their lead data scientist, Alexandra Arnson, who ended up being my supervisor. So we had a chat, and it went really well, and so it really worked out just kind of out of nowhere. I feel like the job found me. It just kind of popped up in my email, so It was great.
Awesome. I'm guessing this wasn't the making copies, getting coffee kind of internship.
Yeah, no, it was. They put me to work, and there was a lot of responsibility, which was what I was looking for. I was not interested in being the coffee runner. I really wanted to do some meaningful work. I think to better explain the work I did, it would help to give a little bit more context about what NRG actually does.
Sure.
And so if you'll entertain me, here's kind of the example I like to give.
All right.
And I want you to imagine that you are responsible for building a new water park. And as a part of that, you have to decide a good location. Your friend might suggest, oh, we can build the water park here in the desert. But maybe you can imagine a desert is not a great place for a water park. Where are you going to get the water? And solar companies have to make similar decisions. They have to decide what location makes the most sense for their array of solar panels. And for them, it's not quite as black and white. They might visit a site one day and maybe it's very sunny on that particular day, but then if it's cloudy 300 other days out of the year, it probably won't make sense. And so that's where NRG comes in. They specialize in making these towers that have different environmental sensors that can measure things like solar irradiance, which is how powerful the sun is, as well as dirt and pollen content in the air, because it would give the solar companies an idea of how often they would have to clean their solar panels, which of course is costly. And so taking this maybe years worth of environmental data, solar companies can use that to then decide whether or not they want to invest in a site. And so where I came in is basically looking at all this data, which to a human, it just looks like a bunch of random numbers, but then using my computer science background to parse through this engineering data and be able to suggest improvements and ways to improve the efficiency of their process.
So they design, build, and test measurement devices for wind and solar.
Right.
That's as you just explained.
Right.
Sounds like it's something that you might like to do.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting. And as I mentioned earlier, I've grown increasingly interested in working in the power scene in one way or another. And I think renewables are particularly exciting. And it's interesting, the more I've learned about the renewables field, the more challenges I've learned, the more it's really hard to integrate solar and wind into our current power grid infrastructure. And I think it sounds very exciting to be a part of that change and helping make the grid more flexible and willing to take different power sources, because the improvements that we've seen in the industry in the last 15 years have been incredible. I mean, solar has gone from one of the most expensive forms of power to one of the cheapest, and that's because of the work of people in the industry just pushing the limits and trying to make things as efficient as possible. And I think that to me gets me really excited about being part of that change.
A lot of water parks to put out there. A lot of water parks to figure out where to site them.
Right.
These next two questions are connected. What did you learn at NRG that you didn't learn in the classroom?
At NRG, I think one thing that was pretty unique was the presentations that I was able to give. And I've given presentations in class before, and I never really had a problem with that. I'm totally fine standing in front of my peers and giving a talk in front of people I know. But in that industry setting, there's a little more pressure, when you have the company executives there and this 100 other people from this company watching. It's a different level of responsibility, and it's a little stressful. You got to really learn how to talk to this audience. And so that was a big thing that I took away from this internship. How do I present my ideas to the sales team and the product development team and the engineering team that are all in the same room? And how do I explain things in a way that everybody will understand?
Bigger stakes.
Right,
Bigger
exactly.
stakes.
So,
all right, so let's flip it. What did you learn in the classroom that you couldn't have learned at NRG?
I think, one thing that has been really valuable at my university experience has been the ability to, I basically learned how to learn. And I think that's been the biggest thing I've gotten out of my years at UVM, because you'll go from one engineering class that's just super dense, hard material, and then you'll be there for, say, 50 minutes, and then you gotta jump into a different class where it's just as dense, but on a completely different subject. And you have to be able to snap out of that mode you were just in, and then we're going into something new, and you have to readjust and recalibrate yourself and be able to always adapt, essentially. And so it forces you to use your brain in ways that maybe you don't as much in industry, where maybe you can spend a day focusing mostly on one or maybe two things. Here you're always bouncing around and you're always adjusting, and it's been a good brain exercise for sure.
Plans for after graduation?
Yeah, I'm excited that I have a job lined up in southeastern New Hampshire, so I'll still be close to home, which I'm happy about. And that's going to be at a small company who works with power planning in industrial buildings. And essentially, their main job is looking at buildings or companies that use a ton of power and finding ways to make their processes more efficient. And so that means making things, whether it be a company wanting to install their own solar on their roofs, or just trying to take their current process and finding inefficiencies and saving them some money by making it as efficient as possible. And so I'm really excited. I think it's going to be a great start to my career in this field, and I'm really excited that the steps I've taken up until this point have led to a really exciting start to my career.
And for those viewers in southeastern New Hampshire, what's the name of the company?
The company is called Waldron Engineering and Construction. It's pretty small. It's based in Exeter, New Hampshire. But I'm really excited. I had a great interview there. The people seemed really nice, and I really liked the area. It reminded me of Vermont in a lot of ways, which it kind of made me feel at home. So.
Well, as a Vermonter, I would feel a little bit of like losing you to New Hampshire, but I'm sure you'll be back. Ethan, thank you so much for joining me today. It was great talking to you.
Appreciate it.
My thanks to the team behind the scenes here at WCX, who always understand things in both theory and practice. I'm Keith Silva. This is Across the Fence. Thanks for being part of our family.